Now is that wonderful part of our Sunday morning where we enter the silence, where everything is beautiful and golden, where all is well, where we meet the divine within us and know truth and peace. So I invite you to relax. Take some long, deep breaths, inhaling deeply. Hold that breath for a moment. And as you release it, release any cares, any concerns, anything that's coming between you and peace. Another long, deep breath. Inhaling deeply. Hold that breath. And then release. Letting go of anything and everything that is standing between you and joy, between you and health, between you and all the good you were created to experience in this world. Breathe deeply once again, bringing your awareness deep within, connecting with that divine presence at the core of your being. Without agenda, without specific goal, allow yourself simply to be part of that divine presence. Absorb it, bask in it. Know unity with universal intelligence and all that is good in the silence. In oneness, I am healed. In oneness, I am soothed and know peace. In oneness, joy fills me to overflowing. And I celebrate this glorious experience called life. Thank you for the rich unfolding blessings of this moment that pour through me now and carry me through the day and the week as I return again and again to this sacred place of meditation. Thank you, God. And so it is.
Good morning. You all set?
No. I'll be right back.
Okay. Bill will be back.
Told
You did. So very often, perhaps you've had the opportunity and the joy or delight to hear Bill by himself and or me. And now we're going to do it together. This is one of Bill's songs called Dancing on the Edge.
Scares me half to death to feel so alive. Have to draw my deepest breath and keep my eyes open wide. 'Cause I can clearly see there's no better way to live than passionately. Eddie said if you're not living on the edge, taking up too much space. Heard he told her love grows cold without a little faith. Wanna start a fire? Better find the spark. Wanna feel a higher love? Find a way to start dancing on the edge of your heart. Doesn't matter what you do, it's how you do it. If that old self be true, you can do it. But you gotta dig a little deeper to find no better place to live than right on the line. But he said if you're not living on the edge, taking up too much space. But he told her love grows cold without a little faith. Won't start a fire, better find a spark. Wanna feel a higher love, better find a way to start dancing on the edge of your heart. the edge of your heart. Dancing on the edge of your heart. Dancing on the edge of your heart. Dancing, dancing, dancing on the edge of your
Gentlemen, you are definitely living on the edge, the cutting edge of great music. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
So, does everybody here have all the joy in their life that they can possibly handle? Well, maybe I should rephrase that differently. Is there anybody here who would like a little more joy in their life? Okay, you're in the right place, because that's our focus this morning. You know, we all want joy, don't we? We want joy, we want happiness, we want to be filled with it. But if we all have this goal, how come we're not all experiencing more of it, or more often? You know, in the Old Testament concordance, they list 57 references to laughter and countless references to joy, gladness, rejoicing, and happiness. If you flip over to the New Testament, you'll find somewhere in the neighborhood of 287 references to joy, to gladness, to rejoicing, to happiness, to merriment. There's just a couple of them. From Isaiah, we read, "Thou shalt go out in joy. The mountains and the hills shall burst before you in song." Ecclesiastes says, "Gladness of the heart is the life of man, and joyfulness of a man prolongs his days." In Psalms we read, "Let the heavens rejoice, let the earth be glad, let the sea roar. Let the fields be joyful and all therein. Then shall all the trees of the wood rejoice." Proverbs speaks to joy and admonishes us. "A merry heart is like good medicine." And in the New Testament, Yeshua the Christ tells us, "I have said these things to you, so that my joy in you may be complete." And it's not just from traditional Christianity. The Talmud tells us, "Divine Spirit does not reside in any but the joyful heart." An 18th century English preacher, Charles Spurgeon, who was known in his day as the Prince of Preachers, says, "It's not how much we have, but how much we enjoy that makes happiness." And Paramahansa Yogananda reminds us, "You must be joyous and happy because you are God's dream." Wow. So with all of this wisdom and sage acknowledgement of joy across the eons, across various faith systems, why don't we experience more joy? Why aren't we joyful all the time? Yeah, there are actually a few reasons for it. We're going to take a look at that, and then we're going to look at ways to work around and capture and celebrate more joy in our life. Are you ready for that this morning?
Yeah.
All right. You know, when we think about joy, when we think about happiness, when we think about good things, so many people have come to me over the years in spiritual counseling and said, "Well, why do I focus on all the negative stuff all the time?" And we do that. We know now, neurologically, we are hardwired to notice the bad, to notice the negative. And if you think about it, this is pretty handy for those of us that want to survive in this world. You know, if you're walking down the street, on a sidewalk out for a stroll on a pretty day like today, and the cars are cruising by in their lanes where they belong, there's no need to pay any attention. So the mind, the neurology in our heads, just kind of tunes those out. But the minute one of those cars swerves and aims at you, boom, you're on high alert. Your mind says, look out, we've got to fight or flee. Something's wrong, we have to address it. Our mind is hardwired to protect us, not to seek out joy and good things, because it doesn't need to react to that. It doesn't need to do anything, but it does need to protect us. So be gentle with yourself when you don't naturally recognize good and wonderful things in your life. You see, that's our job to do as spiritual seekers. And when we discover those moments of joy, those good things, then it's our job to consciously acknowledge them, to embrace them, and to celebrate them. Another reason we don't always experience all the joy we'd like is we have that darn human ego thing going on. Now, this is a little different than that human instinct of survival. Our human ego is that part of us that's so tied to our thoughts and our feelings, and our ego thinks our thoughts and feelings are everything. And because they're so tied to that sensory experience, they can often mislead us. The other challenge with human ego is when we are happy, when we are joyful, when things are going well, ego doesn't have anything to do. Ego is shoved off in the corner, and you know what? Ego doesn't like that. The human ego is happiest when we're unhappiest. So we need to be aware of that and factor that in as we experience life and consider how are we going to recognize joy, how are we going to embrace joy, how are we going to rise above our mere humanity to a higher spiritual place where joy can really be embraced. You know, in the Revealing Word, speaking of human ego, Charles Fillmore, the Unity co-founder, says, human ego blocks the flow of spiritual life and is the source of every trouble in the world. Its selfishness and greed make men grovel in the mire of materiality when they might instead soar in the heavens of spirituality. Where would you like to be? Mired in materiality or soaring in spirituality? In their book, The Quest, Unity ministers Richard and Mary Alice La Jolla give us this sage insight to embracing joy and being joy. They tell us this: when you touch the Christ of your being, that's what we know as God in us, that innate divinity. When you touch the Christ of your being and can rest for a few moments in that sense of peace and trust that you find there, you automatically come away overflowing with joy. Did you feel that this morning after a few minutes of meditation? Did you sense a shift? Did you feel a difference? Did you feel different before and after the meditation time? That's what they're referring to. They go on to say this feeling is totally spontaneous and has nothing to do with what's happening in your life. Joy, true joy, is not something you take from without, but something that you let out from within you. Events give us an excuse to feel it. So they're telling us true joy, real joy, persistent joy that is not tied to outside events is an inside job. And it's important that we remember that. It all starts with our spiritual practices and flows out from there. But events do and can give us opportunities to feel joy give us opportunities to focus on the joy we want. So how do we create more good in our lives? We do that by focusing, not on the good that we want, but on the good we already have. And I know that sounds really simple, and it is. It's simple. It's not necessarily easy. Our world revels in difficulty and disaster. Flip on the news and you'll see it every evening, multiple times through the evening. How many of you get the news report on your computer, your Kindle, or your iPhone? What do they give you? Reports of everything bad that's going on in the world, things you better be aware of, things you better be careful about. I read a few years back about some folks that decided they were going to publish a newspaper of nothing but good news. And they folded after about 4 months. Because there just weren't that many people willing to invest themselves enough to subscribe to getting good news every day. What does that say about us? We tend to get into the drama. Think about it. How many times do you walk into a room and greet your friends and say, "Let me tell you about the wonderful things that are going on in my life"? Well, I know it happens sometimes. But if you pay attention to yourself, if you pay attention to what's going on around you, when people get together, I think you'll see more frequently than not, people are talking about, "Oh, let me tell you about what happened last week. What a bummer. Let me tell you about this horrible thing this person said." And then their friend answers, "If you think that's bad, let me tell you about the terrible thing this person did." We get into the drama. And that's that human ego that we were just talking about before. I think we are addicted to drama. We seem to love disaster and problems. And that old human ego, it wants to keep us stirred up. Because only when we're stirred up, only when we're into the drama, does it have power. When we step away from the drama, when we nurture joy and happiness and focus on good things, human ego dissolves because it has nothing to live on. Do you want to increase your joy quotient? I do. I've had great fun this week. I've shared with you before that every time I pick a lesson topic, I get to live it all week long. So I've learned a few things about myself this week. I've learned a few things about joy this week. First thing I've learned that I want to reiterate is what we have been told. Joy is innate to the spiritual journey, but we need to give ourselves permission to be joyful. I know that sounds a little silly, but there's a lot of wisdom to that. How many of us go through life so somber and solemn? We think that life is heavy and we have to be sober all the time. Some of you may be familiar with Harold Bloomfield, authored a book called How to Survive the Loss of a Love, and numerous other self-help books. One of the things he shares with us is the way to maximize your creativity. If you want to be creative, think about this. The way to maximize your creativity is to cultivate as much inner joy as possible and give yourself permission to enjoy yourself fully. Cultivate inner joy and give yourself permission to enjoy yourself fully. If we want more good, if we want more joy, more success, more happiness, the good that we already have right here, right now in our lives, that needs to be our focus. Basic spiritual principle. What we focus on, we get more of, right? Another way to cultivate joy, once we've given ourselves permission to be joyful, to experience joy and to live in it, is take yourself so darn seriously. You've seen that bumper sticker floating around, life's a bear and then you die? What kind of philosophy of life is that? And what kind of joy? Not going to get much out of that. Some years ago, I lived on Bainbridge Island. It's an island in Puget Sound just across the water from Seattle. Darling little town, actually several little towns. And one of my favorite shops on the island had all of these knickknacks and doodads and all kinds of treasures, new age things, books, just a whole variety of things. It was a great place to go buy a cup of coffee and hang out for the afternoon. And I remember being in that store one afternoon, and there's this whole display of coffee cups. And emblazoned on the cup, each of these cups, it says, "Lighten up." I looked at those cups and I thought, lighten up? What's that about? Well, I happen to be acquainted with the proprietor of the store, and when you live in a small town like Bainbridge is, you're kind of acquainted with everyone. So I got to chatting with her about what are these lighten up cups? And she said, "Oh, I'm so excited, I just got those in." She said, people are so heavy, so dark, so immersed in their problems. We all need to just lighten up. And if you were around this woman much at all, and if you were in her social circle, sooner or later, you were gifted one of these little coffee cups that reminded you to lighten up. And it might have had a pound of your favorite coffee stuffed in it. It might have had some nice tea put in it. She put little plants in it. She put little trinkets. Wonderful gifts, but always the reminder to lighten up. Don't take everything in life so darn seriously. We're here to have fun, right? Let's have fun. Let's enjoy our time here. Another way to increase our joy quotient is to acknowledge life's little blessings. You know, we tend to celebrate big things, big events, big accomplishments. But do we take time to celebrate the little things? If they made a whole movie about my left foot some years ago, then I feel free to tell you about my left toe. I've had a problem with that toe on my foot for several years, and it has been getting increasingly painful. And I have tried more darn things short of going to the doctor and suggesting they might want to remove it altogether. And I finally stumbled across a little solution that was so easy, very inexpensive, and the minute I applied that solution, the pain went away like that and has stayed gone. Now I know my left toe in the greater scheme of things is not a big deal, but when you've been in pain for a long time, when it hurts to walk, when the pressure of a sheet from your bed at night and your foot wakes you up, it's a little annoying. So suddenly being alleviated of that pain and that discomfort, such joy. And I get to be reminded of it continually. Every time I put on a shoe on my left foot, every time I pull on a sock, when I stand in the shower and look at my toes, I celebrate that left toe. It's not just about the toe, it's about cultivating joy. And the more I celebrate that toe and being finally pain-free, the more I experience joy in other areas of my life. So what's a little thing in your life? Doesn't have to be a big earth-shaking thing, but what little thing in life causes you to experience joy? That's the thing you want to wrap your arms around, you want to wrap your head around, and celebrate it, and be with it, and cultivate joy. There is nothing too small in life that doesn't deserve to be celebrated. And we do need to celebrate. We need to celebrate our little achievements. We don't need to wait till the whole project's completed to celebrate an accomplishment. If you've been in the construction industry, you know when they raise those great big skyscrapers, when that last beam is soldered into place, they have a topping off ceremony. Well, the building's not done by a long shot, only the framework. There's more work to do. But they pause and they take a moment and they celebrate. Wow, look how far we've come so far. Yes, there's more to do, but let's take a moment to celebrate how far we've come up until this point. Think about life. We don't celebrate people only when they die. We celebrate births, we celebrate birthdays, we celebrate graduations and weddings and anniversaries and other accomplishments along the way. And then, yes, down the road when people make their transition, we celebrate their life. But those intermediate celebrations along the way are critical to celebrate them and critical for us to celebrate joy, to recognize that each step along the way of life is important. Not just the big steps, not just the final step. Every step is important and worth celebrating. We had an important step here at Unity of the Valley this week. It's been developing for many months. We have been looking at our overall cash flow and realizing that it's not exactly what we'd like it to be. We came to the brilliant conclusion that if we somehow managed our mortgage payment a little bit differently, there would be more cash flow to manage more effectively. So with great gratitude to John Hendrickson for all of his work, this last Friday, John and your board president, Jeff Scheffler, and I sat with the bank to complete this process. It was an interesting moment for a whole lot of reasons. One of the things that came to me in this whole process as the banker was going through all of the loan documents that we needed to sign, he was going through this checklist of things that I hadn't consciously paid attention to. He informed us, you don't have any liens against your building, there are no suits against you, no judgments, no defaults. I thought, oh, that's really cool. And we're concerned about cash flow and making the mortgage every month, but look what we've accomplished along the way and over the years. He pointed out to us that we own over 78% of this building. So what we were financing was a very small amount as part of the big picture. That's really cool. We forget to stop and see how far we've come. So sitting with the banker the other morning for me was joyful to be reminded of what this spiritual community has accomplished over the years. Not that our work is done, but we are making great strides along the way, and it's important that we celebrate it. And so as our meeting with the banker was concluded, John and Jeff and I went out and partied wildly. Well, we didn't get thrown out of Starbucks. But we went out and we had a cup of coffee and we sat there and we toasted this milestone along the way. That's what we need to do. Celebrate each step along the way. Take time to savor it, to enjoy it, to be with it, to acknowledge how far we've come. And as we do that, as we celebrate what we have, as we bless it, simultaneously, we are opening the door for more blessings to flow into our lives, for more blessings to flow into this spiritual community. Another way to increase our joy quotient is to reframe your thinking about what's going on. Let me tell you what this looks like. And the subtitle of this part of my lesson says, look for the silver lining. This morning, when you drove to church? Did you drive on a muddy, rutted wagon trail? No, we all drove here on streets and highways. Okay, I know they've got potholes, but we got here pretty efficiently and effectively, didn't we? But we complain. We complain about the traffic, we complain about the potholes, we complain about the road construction. Oh my gosh, we're about to enter that season, aren't we? And we complain about the taxes that it takes to maintain these beautiful roads that we enjoy and have a tendency to take for granted. Taxes. Oh boy. Did we have fun this month? Everybody get their taxes filed and paid, or at least extended? Lee and I sat down a few weeks ago with our financial planner who also does our taxes, and he went over the final tally, and I was delighted to discover that we were getting a little money back from the state of Minnesota and a little bit of money back from the federal IRS. I got so excited. There's this windfall that I hadn't been expecting. That was my first thought. My second thought was, oh, well, that's just enough money to pay our tax preparer and just enough money to pay our May property taxes. Oh, I was immediately depressed. Took all the wind out of my sails, but it didn't last long because I made a choice. I made a choice to look at it differently, to reframe it. And rather than being disappointed that the money was only going to go so far, I decided I was going to celebrate that that money was going to cover 2 significant bills. Yay! Reframe it. Look for the good. Look for the silver lining. And as you reframe it, as you connect with joy, notice how you feel. You see, how we feel is that vibration that we're putting out into the universe. Spiritual law says the universe will respond to us in kind. So if I stayed in that place of being dismayed because the money wasn't going to go that far, because it wasn't quite the windfall I was thinking it was, what was I going to get more of? A long downhill slide. But I made a choice, a very conscious choice, to focus on the upside, to be happy about it, to be joyful about it. And interestingly, once I made that choice, within about 4 hours, I got notification of 2 other very good pieces of news. Our joy brings more joy to us. We need to seek joy. We need to look for it. We need to find it in our lives. Kind of like stopping and smelling the roses. But don't just stop and smell the roses. Don't just notice, oh, there's something to be joyful about. Be joyful. Take time to embrace it, to savor it, to get your arms around what that means to you, how it feels. And then share your joy. Pay attention to all the good in your life and share it with someone else. When you share your joy, it actually multiplies. It becomes more because you're sharing it. And as you share your joy, you give other people opportunities to share theirs. And we've got prayer of transformation groups forming here, which I find really exciting. I've participated in those prayer groups, similar prayer groups over the years. And one of the groups I was in, we discovered the secret of adding joy. So instead of getting together once a week and just focusing on what we were praying for, what we wanted to draw into our lives, we created a rule for ourselves that we had to share at least one thing that since our last meeting brought us joy. And sharing our joy with each other, applauding each other along the way, even as we prayed for those things we were co-creating together, really shifted our consciousness and it shifted our effectiveness. life keeps happening. Difficulties will keep presenting themselves. That's the nature of the world. It's how you and I respond to that makes all the difference. Now, we don't need to be Pollyanna-ish. We don't want to say, oh, everything's lovely when there's work to be done. We don't want to deny our legitimate feelings. They do need to be recognized and honored. If you're feeling sad or disappointed, it's okay. But don't move in with those feelings. Don't stay there. We need to be consistent in engaging spiritual law. And that starts with what the W Hwy told us. When you touch the Christ of your being and come rest for a few moments in that sense of trust and peace, you will automatically come away overflowing with joy. That feeling is spontaneous, has nothing to do with what's happening in your life. Joy is something you don't take from without, but something you let out from within you. Events give us an opportunity to feel it. Yeshua says, I came that you might have life and might have it abundantly. And the way we do that is to experience more joy. First, foremost, and always, align ourselves with that great creative intelligence of the universe. Know our oneness with Mother, Father, God. Give yourself permission to be joyful. Don't hold back. It's okay to be happy. Don't take life too seriously. Celebrate even the smallest victories, because they open the doors for you to find more things to be joyful about. The situation looks difficult, reframe it. Look for the silver lining, find the good in it, and celebrate that good. Consciously look for life's gifts. Consciously look for ways, reasons to be joyful. Seek it out and celebrate it, and then share it. Pay attention to all that good in your life. Savor it. Talk about it. Share your joy with others so that everyone can reap the benefits of joy and share their joy with you. Joy is said to be an acronym for Journey of Yes. J-O-Y, Journey of Yes. That means saying yes to all of life's wonderful gifts. And the more we say yes to those gifts, the more we embrace them and enjoy them, treasure them, the more gifts flow into our lives. So let's join together in our affirmation, affirming and knowing joy. Each day I look for the good of my life, savoring and celebrating it with gratitude and joy. Thank you, Mother, Father, God. And so it is.